Hello and welcome to today's expert chat on special education and the new administration. My name is Andrew Lee and I'm with the Understood team. Our mission here at Understood is to bring parents and advocates the information and resources they need to help the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Understood doesn't take any positions on government policies, but many of our founding partners do. That includes the National Center for Learning Disabilities. And we're really happy to have with us here today Lindsay Jones. She is the Chief Policy and Advocacy Officer for NCLD. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, Andrew.
Lindsay, could you tell our audience a little bit about NCLD and your role there?
Yes, absolutely. So I am the Chief Policy and Advocacy Officer at NCLD. NCLD is a parent-run, parent-led organization. It's a nonprofit, and we provide resources to parents in many different forms, and we also have a role in advocacy that we've played for about the last 40 years, and that's what I work in. I run our advocacy program, our policy and advocacy program.
So it's really amazing to me that for 4 decades, NCLD has had this policy and advocacy work in Washington, D.C. Speaks to your expertise, I think, and it's really exciting to have you here to talk about this topic. Before we start, I just want to remind people who are watching that you can ask questions. Just type them into the comments below, and we're going to try to get to every single question and have Lindsay answer them. With that said, let's start off with our first question for Lindsay. When a new president comes in, what types of changes might we see at the U.S. Department of Education?
Sure. So when a new president enters, we see changes in leadership. First and foremost, a president has the opportunity to appoint the leader of the Department of Education, and that is the Secretary of Education. That appointment, as most people know, has to be approved by Congress, but that's the key appointment they make at the department. That person then can make lots of other leadership changes. There are key positions all throughout the department. So the biggest change we see at the Department of Education is in leadership, and then what are the priorities of those leaders and how will those influence becomes the next thing we begin to focus on.
So that's going to be a big change, a new Secretary of Education. Who is that new Secretary of Education, and what should parents know about her?
So Secretary Betsy DeVos was confirmed last week, and she is a lifelong philanthropist. She's from the state of Michigan. She hasn't worked in a public school as a teacher or educator, but she has spent her career working on causes in and around education, supporting various organizations that have different types of education reform causes.
We've heard, or at least I've heard, and I think probably many of our parents who are watching have heard some controversy around Betsy DeVos. What's that controversy all about? Where does it stem from?
Yeah, I think this is controversy, or this is the response that we've heard from the people around the nation, and the interest level in her nomination and confirmation has been unparalleled in recent years, really intense, and frankly, we'll talk about some of the controversies in a second, but I do have to say from my position, it's great to see people care and are engaged and involved. Now, there have been a range of things covered in the media. I would just focus on a couple for our organization and our kids with learning and attention issues that we advocate for. First, prior to her nomination, although she had worked as a philanthropist in education causes, we didn't have a good understanding of her knowledge of individuals with disabilities and the laws that apply to them, the important civil rights that they have. So initially, we wanted to learn more about that. She can make some pretty big policy decisions that influence our kids, all kids, including ours, but we wanted to get a better sense of that. She didn't have a record of giving lots of speeches on those topics. So there was a lot of concern about how she felt initially. I think the second thing is the causes she's supported have largely involved a topic that's just referred to loosely as school choice. And that can take it can take several forms, but basically it can be charter schools and support for charter schools, or voucher programs and voucher type programs. Now, we have some concern as a community, as a disability community, with those programs and how they serve students with disabilities, what happens to children's rights in those situations. So that, I think, caused some controversy as well. Her views in those areas, those are just controversial areas in the community. And then I'd say the third thing that we focused on is, I think people are, if you're aware of Secretary DeVos, you know she has been a philanthropist. She had many interests, financial interests in different companies. And the Office of Government Ethics did conduct a thorough review of her holdings. She agreed to make several changes before taking the position as Secretary of Education as a result of that. And there were some things that didn't change. NCLD and one of our great partner organizations, the Learning Disabilities Association of America, also an understood partner, had some concerns about her in a continuing investment she would have in a company called NeuroCore. NeuroCore speaks about helping individuals with ADHD, autism, and anxiety, and it's a form of neurobiofeedback. Neurobiofeedback is a new emerging area in the science, and is now being really investigated. There's a study at the National Institute of Health that'll be the first major study to look at neurobiofeedback. There are some promising results. The particular thing that concerned us was her holding in the company might influence her decisions, and it might influence the way she thinks about policy regarding kids with attention issues and attention disorders. And we were concerned about that, wanted to make sure that there were no questions about that holding and how it might influence the way she guides the department with regard to those students. So those are three of the controversies we were focused on.
That's really excellent to give our parents a sense of some of the controversies that are out there, the NeuroCore. Let's shift just really specifically about the knowledge of special education, because we did get a question in from Amy Bergman. Thank you for this question. Do we know what her position is, Betsy DeVos, on special education? And this is a really excellent question from Amy. Does Betsy DeVos have a sort of mentor of some sort to give her background knowledge of this? Are there supports even within the Department of Education to to maybe help learn about IDEA, special education? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So I would say the first thing is we still don't have a good understanding of her personal knowledge of special education and how it works in schools. I think what is important is the next part of this question, which is, it's a couple things. So first, are there supports within the Department of Education? There are very well-respected, strong career employees of the Department of Education who have incredible knowledge about special education and who we've worked with for 40 years. I think they will serve as a great guide to her in helping her identify areas of interest and just learn more about special education. But next, I would say this is the role of the advocacy community. And NCLD wants to join with our partners and lead this. I think the best place to learn about special education in the beginning, at least, is from parents and individuals with disabilities. So they can talk about, what is this? How does it impact my daily life? And get it. And why is it important? How do I use it in a school? I think those are some really good opportunities for us to be able to bring those voices forward and help make sure that Secretary DeVos does have a good understanding about special education. She did provide, during her hearing, she gave some answers that were concerning to us, and we issued a statement. I think you can see it on Understood. I know you can also see it on NCLD's website. We issued a statement kind of highlighting our concerns with a particular answer about IDEA, where she mentioned that she felt states could make decisions about how they would implement IDEA. That's not the way IDEA works, and it's very important to us that the federal government provides oversight of this important civil rights law. And so we had to speak out at that point and bring that up. I think there is a great opportunity going forward to work with the new administration to help educate them about all of the different opportunities and ways for kids with disabilities and learning intention issues to succeed and thrive.
Great. And I just want to emphasize that this is really an opportunity, I think, that you're saying for parents and advocates to educate others about special education and learning attention issues. I think that's a really fabulous point. We're getting a lot of questions in here, so I'm going to sort of move on to the next one to talk about sort of the changes we might see. You mentioned that, new administration, we get new Secretary of Education. What are some of the changes at the U.S. Department of Education that might affect kids with learning and attention issues? And could you also talk about what might stay in place? There's a lot of talk out there. Does IDEA change, the law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act? Just give us a sense of what's changing and what's really staying in place.
Sure. Yeah, this is really important. So first of all, you have to kind of I know that everybody probably knows this, but just to point out that the Department of Education itself serves a purpose of implementing the law. It can set a lot of priorities. Its leadership does have discretion over how they may direct investments, what types of things and programs they want to push forward. But they are limited in the Department of Education by the laws that exist. So nothing in the IDEA, the law itself, is changed by the Department of Education. Nothing in ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, is changed. But the Department of Education has a very key role in helping states and local school districts implement those laws. So the department does things like it issues clarifying guidance letters. It puts forth regulations. All of those things can have a really profound impact on our schools and our states and the way that education is delivered. And the third thing that they can do is they put forward the president's budget every year. And I think everybody here knows, we spend money on things we care about. And that holds true with the leadership at the Department of Education as well. And so under the Obama administration, we saw a new program called Race to the Top. Very large investment, did require some changes for states to be able to compete to receive those grants, and definitely had some parameters around the grants that were trying to drive education policy in ways the administration thought were appropriate. We certainly would expect to see this new administration put forward its ideas, possibly through grant programs or competitions, and also even further in ways they have discretion throughout the department. So that's what we're watching for now.
Great. And so just to put a fine point on that, the laws that you mentioned, you said that IDEA, ESSA, those aren't changing, but this Department of Education has a lot of influence over how those interpreted, the regulations, how they kind of are sort of implemented in the states. Is that right?
Yes.
So a follow-up to that question, because we got a great question from Tasha here. She has a child, second grade, with an IEP. Her question really, I think, is she going to see any immediate changes for her IEP right now? Or will any child who has an IEP see those changes right now? Will they see if they're being evaluated for special education?
So there's a sort of short answer to that, which is no. You shouldn't see any immediate changes to your child's IEP or their 504 plan or their plan of education right now. The Department of Education can, as it moves forward, incentivize these new programs. And so we at NCLD, and I encourage everyone on this call and on others, will be watching to make sure that we can provide our opinions and educate and hopefully steer the department and its priorities in directions that we think will help all of our students. But the department really is at a much more like a 40,000-foot level. So in your child's IEP or 504, you should not see any immediate changes.
Okay, so not any immediate changes. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the future, because I think that might be where some parents are concerned. We've got a few questions here. Thank you again for everybody who's watching for sending these questions in. We're trying to get to all of them about sort of what we might be hearing about future things the new administration might do. Some people are mentioning school choice. Can you give us a sense of what we might see in the future from this new administration? I know you can't make exact predictions, but you must have some idea of what might happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So President Trump, during his campaign, put forward really only one major idea around education, and that was involving school choice. He proposed a $20 billion program for states to provide and incentivize choice and school voucher programs. So that's our indication of where the department's priorities might lead them. Additionally, we do know, of course, Secretary DeVos has a long history working for organizations and promoting school choice. So these are areas we're looking at. And basically, when I say school choice, there's no perfect definition of that, but we are talking about offering parents and others schools that are could be charter schools or could be vouchers, which I'll describe in just a minute, but a voucher program which a parent could take like a coupon, in a sense, from the state and enroll in a private school or a parochial school of their choice. So I do think the reason that we call it school choice is because it's meant to say you don't just have to go to your neighborhood school. You could enroll in one of these other options. So we believe that their policies will lead them in this direction, and we're looking very closely at both of those. Just briefly to address vouchers, because charters have been around for a long time, as have vouchers, but voucher programs for parents of children with disabilities or parents like Tara, a student with an IEP, I think we need to look at those carefully, and anyone who would choose them needs to really understand those and what that means. So a voucher program is created when the government gives you a cash amount, basically, for your student, and you can spend those dollars on education in any setting that you choose. So that could be a private school, a parochial school, or maybe if you were, it could be possible that you homeschool your child and you enroll in an online setting, or you purchase other supplies to assist you in homeschooling your student, other educational materials. For students with IEPs or protections under IDEA, most voucher programs, all but 3 in our nation, require them to give up their rights under IDEA. And that's just an important thing to know. And we need to make sure parents are informed of that. And we're concerned about that. We're a little concerned about what that means for the protections of and the civil rights that we know are needed. So there's a whole host of stuff we could talk about around vouchers. There's also issues with charter schools, but charter schools are public schools. So they are a different version of a public school, but they must follow all of the laws. So I just want to be clear on that difference, that if you enroll your student in a charter school, it's clear under the law, they must follow the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504. So there's a difference there between those programs.
Yeah, so the school choice really encompasses a number of different things. You mentioned charter schools. I think we had a question here. Thank you again for that question from one of our parents about, does charter schools have to enforce IDA or have to follow IDA? And you said definitely yes. So I think that's a great point to make. But the voucher seems a little bit different, and that seems like something that takes place in private schools. Do you have a sense right now of what states that might be rolled out in, or how it might affect states like that may not have voucher programs? One of our parents is asking about that. Or is it just too early to tell?
Well, it's important to point out that right now, I think it's 13 different states do have voucher programs. So some states have created these. Nevada, Arizona, Florida has had, I think, the longest, a program that's been in the place the longest, Arkansas. So you want to check with your state to figure out whether you have a voucher program. We don't know right now. We're in a new legislative session in the states, and so we're closely monitoring states that are introducing this legislation. It's been very controversial even at the state level. For example, I think if you watched the Secretary DeVos's confirmation hearings, you might have seen that Senator Susan Collins from the state of Maine and Senator Lisa Murkowski from the state of Alaska voted against Secretary DeVos's nomination. Now, one reason that they cited in that was that, Alaska and Maine, like many of our other states, have very large rural populations. And in reality, voucher programs they're hard to use in a rural. There's not a lot of in a rural setting. There's not a lot of choice in a rural setting. You can't, oftentimes there are huge distances between public schools. So I think those concerns really will come to the forefront as well, as the idea that the number one concern we see around this is that the way that President Trump has proposed the voucher program is that the $20 billion, and we'll see if this plays out. This was during the campaign, but that would be money that would be taken, diverted from current programs in the federal government that they're funding. Well, the two biggest programs the federal government funds are basically Title I, which is extra federal money for low-income schools in schools with high populations of low-income students, and IDEA. IDEA is about $11 billion. So our concern is that by removing the $20 billion, you will impact the current services we're providing. And then just finally, we have 50 million public school students in this nation, 5 million others going to private schools. It's going to trying to get each one of those students a voucher, 50 million students. I mean, it's a huge, huge scope of where this will go. So there are so many unanswered questions about where the federal government, where Secretary DeVos and the President Trump's administration might go on this, that right now I'd say if your state is considering one, you have a couple important questions to ask. How much money will it provide? What happens to my rights under IDEA? What happens to the funding for my public school system? Is it decreased by creating a voucher program? What will happen in rural settings? Those are kind of some things that you need to know about vouchers.
So we got a very specific question. Will the voucher take money away from a public school, or is this really like we can't answer it right now because we don't know all the details? This was a question from Cheryl Hoffman, or is it, I just want to be able to give her an answer on that, or tell her that maybe there isn't an answer because it hasn't been determined yet.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on, theoretically there's enough money for everything, right? Because they could appropriate, as we advocate for, we think we need more money for IDEA. So it really depends on the way the voucher program is structured. But because we have not seen, we always have a concern because there's never enough money necessarily for IDEA, for example. We have great concerns about, are you making a decision to spend your money elsewhere and not continuing to fund IDEA? Or are you just providing loads of new funding? It's unclear whether it will, but it's unclear whether it will directly take away from current funding, but that would be of high concern to NCLD. Our public education system is a backbone of this country. We have 50 million students enrolled in it right now. IDEA, which may have flaws, I absolutely agree with that, is necessary and needed. The civil rights that attach to it are needed, and it has never been fully funded. So I'm sorry, I know I'm going on about this, but one last thing, which is Congress, when it originally passed IDEA, said we will provide 40% of the extra cost of funding that's going to be here to the states. And Congress has never gone above 18% of that funding. That's a huge shortfall. And we're not even at 18% today. We're at about 16%. So I would want to know, how are we going to get to 40% and make sure that our kids get what they need in those classrooms?
Yeah, so those are some excellent thoughts. I mean, one of the things that I think that you're saying here is to ask these questions. So if parents are watching, you mentioned, is it going to work in a rural district? What am I giving up? And I think that if you are watching this, all these questions that Lindsay raised are things you should think about asking your school in order to sort of learn more, or your state to learn more. Is that basically right, Lindsay?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So let's move on a little bit to a sort of a topic that came up in the last week. About one of the websites that went down, and a couple people have asked this question, the IDEA website that the federal government maintains. I think it's IDEA 2004. Do you have any information about when that's coming up or what the story is there?
Yeah, so we saw I think it was beginning last week, it might have been the week before, that the website initially went just dark, went down, and now they've put up some information from the original website back up onto the department site. We issued at NCLD a statement about this yesterday. It's on the front page of our website, ncld.org. We've been talking with our contacts at the Department of Education since we noticed it went down, in combination with the disability community. And they have repeatedly told us that this is a technical glitch. They're working on it. They changed vendors. I will say, it seems funny to talk about your government and say they changed vendors, but that is actually pretty typical, that they change vendors with new administrations. It's one of the things you see, kind of a back behind the scenes thing. We've been assured that it should be restored by the end of this week or the middle of next. What I would say is, what an amazing outcry we've seen over that site. I'm so excited people are using it and they notice it and that they're watching. I think it's sending a great message to the Department of Education that disability community is together, that parents of kids with learning and attention issues are informed and they use these resources and they're important, and the department serves a strong and vital role by helping them. And so I have full confidence that the department will restore the site, and at the very least, NCLD will continue to be watching and monitoring and asking questions to make sure it comes back up.
Well, it's great that people are so interested in IDEA and special education. And it goes back to something you said earlier, which is really this is an opportunity to educate others about special education, learning and attention issues, if people are thinking or parents are thinking what they can do. I just want to let the parents out there know that we may not get to every single question out there because there's been so many. So we're going to have time for about one or two remaining. But after that, if you do want to continue this conversation, learn more, we have an FAQ from Lindsay on Understood that really dives a little bit deeper into this, and also you can ask your questions there on our Facebook channel as well and make to get answers. So the URL for that is u.org/special-ed-FAQ, u.org/special-ed-FAQ, in case we don't get to your question or you want a little bit deeper information. So now one or two last questions. A couple people have asked about the Every Student Succeeds Act. I think it was raised earlier in this chat. What's the change in this new administration going to mean for the work that's gone into ESSA? Knowing that the law is going to be there, but the work that the states have done, schools have done, what's going to happen there?
Right. So the Every Student Succeeds Act is our nation's largest and most comprehensive federal education law. And it sort of governs every element of general education, and it works hand in hand with IDEA. And I would say all of our students with disabilities, all of our students with learning and attention issues are general education students first. And we've seen great movement there to make sure that we hold them to high standards and they're part of the general education population first. So ESSA, as I'm going to call it, ESSA is very important for our children, all children, and our children. When the new administration came in and the new Congress was seated, the 115th Congress is in the process of passing some legislation that would change an important accountability rule that the Department of Education under President Obama's leadership put forward. And that regulation, that rule, it would help states. It helps states have some structure and process for implementing ESSA. And states began that, well, I would say like last May. They've been working on that since at least last May. So they're pretty along that process. And I think getting rid of the regulation caused some concern among states who've put in a lot of work. Now, to be clear, we fought at NCLD with our general ed and special ed communities for the law itself has a very strong structure for how states have to use the money and how they're held accountable for it. So there's a lot that's in the law. So even if the regulation went away, most of the things that are required of states would remain. But there were these, what might seem to be small things, but for states who are putting together plans, there are important things about their process that were put sort of into jeopardy by the Congress's move to get rid of this regulation. Secretary DeVos issued a letter on Friday saying she will uphold, states should continue with their work and should continue with the timelines and the plan preparation that they have been. So So I think that's a positive thing because I think states have put a lot of work. The reason for getting rid of the regulation is because Congress wanted to put forward, allow states as much freedom as they would need to craft their own plan. Flexibility, absolutely. Every local situation is different. Again, and that ends. NCLD, our concern is schools are held accountable for all students and how students are performing, and that schools are putting into place good plans and good interventions that our students succeed in the general education curriculum. And I want to say I'm excited because in a couple weeks here on Understood, NCLD and Understood will jointly publish a toolkit for parents about how they can become really good part of their own conversation in their states at the state level about those plans. So I just want to put a plug in for that. We can still expect them to go forward, and parent input is really, really important.
So that ESSA toolkit will help parents get involved in their states. Quickly, the last question. This is from Courtney Reeve. And I think a lot of it on a lot of parents' minds. What's the one thing parents out there could do right now to better advocate for kids with learning and attention issues, and more broadly for kids with disabilities?
Absolutely. So I would say the one thing that parents can really do right now, make sure that your school board, that your local representatives, and that your school district know about students with disabilities, the importance of the law. If you have a child with a learning or attention issue or a disability, tell people about it, share your story, keep that going, and stay involved. Go to ncld.org, sign up for our email alerts. We've got some pretty incredible battles coming forward that we're going to need your voice. Tell people that it's important and that you're watching and you want to see schools make incredible decisions to help all of our kids. Work with your local educators too. I think there's great power in parents and teachers working together in their schools to make sure that all of our kids get what they need to thrive.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lindsay. It's been great to have your expertise, the expertise of NCLD. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to make a little plug. Please stay involved. If you're watching this, maintain your level of engagement going forward because we need you.
Awesome. And for those parents who are interested in learning a little bit more, again, I want to mention that we do have an FAQ from Lindsay on Understood. Give you the URL again, u.org/specialedfaq. That's u.org/specialedfaq. You can ask more questions there. You can also go to our community to continue this conversation, to continue raising awareness and understanding about learning and attention issues. With that, thanks for joining us, and have a great day.